I was a Lego kid growing up. Literally. Thank goodness the curse wore off. Couldn't do anything with those hands. I haven't played with Legos in forever though, and I can't seem to put my finger on why. Of course though, Lego has games of their own. Unlike, say, Minecraft however, they're ironically less about creation and more about destruction. Now there are loads of Lego games out there, usually tying into movies and franchises across all sorts of platforms. However, today, we're only going to be focusing on the 3 games I grew up with: Lego Indiana Jones, The Original Adventures, and Lego Batman, the video game, for PlayStation 2, as well as Lego Indiana Jones, The Adventure Continues for Wii. Of course, however, for ease of recording, I'm going to be using footage of the Steam versions. Now, if you're unfamiliar with these sorts of Lego games, here's what you need to know. They're 3D action platformers in which you punch stuff, and punch stuff, and punch stuff. In Lego Batman, you punch goons. In Lego Indiana Jones, you punch Nazis. With that out of the way, let's start off with Lego Indy 1. Now, I actually haven't seen any Indiana Jones movies before. Actually, you know what? Scratch that thought. I'm gonna watch them. Lego Indy 1 has you playing through the original trilogy of movies, and we're gonna do each one in order. Spoiler warning, of course. We come to our first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark opens up with Indy and a crew of explorers in a South American jungle in 1936, the iconic opening act. Incidents happen, and we dwindle down to our first 2 playable characters, Indy and Sapito. The 2 make it through the jungle and into a temple where Indy proceeds to sneak an idol off a weight-sensitive pedestal, and fails. The 2 start their escape, and, Sapito certainly sticks around longer in the game. Yeah, let's not show that here. Indy and Sapito make their escape, and make it out of the temple unharmed. Or not. Indy is confronted by Bellic, his rival, who is with the tribe and demands that Indy hand over the idol. So, wait, was Indy just gonna steal some tribe's artifact from them? Regardless, Indy hands over the idol and proceeds to make a break for it while Bellic is distracted. Cut to some time later, and Indy is teaching his class back at Barnett College. He's taken aside for a conversation and is presented with an opportunity. Recover the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis do. Indy accepts and flies off to Nepal to meet up with Marion, someone Indy used to know, let's just say that. The implications aren't fun. She's got an artifact that will help Indy locate the Ark. Marion, of course, isn't happy to see Indy, but the 2 end up forming an alliance when the Nazis arrive. One disastrous fire later, the duo make their way out of Nepal and head off for Cairo to begin the hunt for the Ark. Indy and Marion end up getting chased around Cairo some, and then, after some mishaps, Marion gets kidnapped, with Indy believing her to be dead. Some morning later, Indy teams up with Excavator and good friend Sala to find the Well of Souls out in the desert. The 2 succeed in locating the well, and begin combing around for the Ark. Sala and the Ark are hoisted up, only to be ambushed by Nazis who then dump Marion into the snake-infested pit with Indy. The 2 manage to brute force their way out of the well and begin to catch up to the Ark. On their way to the Ark, they have an encounter in the middle of the Nazi camp. A brawl breaks out with some buff dude, who proceeds to get absolutely decimated by a propeller. His movie counterpart didn't have the luxury of staying alive, to say the least. Indy then proceeds to have an extensive on-road brawl during his chase for the Ark, which he finally ends up recovering, and then gives Bellic and crew one heaping dose of fuck you for good measure. The Ark gets loaded onto a ship, and Indy and Marion relax, only for it to be interrupted by the Nazis boarding them via sub. The Ark and Marion get taken, while Indy sneaks on top of the sub and rides all the way to the secret base without drowning or falling off, I guess. Once there, Indy snags a disguise, and then proceeds to rescue Marion, sooner than he does in the movie. Indy catches up to Bellic and crew and goes to blow up the Ark, but then doesn't, I guess, leaving him and Marion to get captured. Okay. Well, they break free in the game one last time and have a boss fight against Bellic, but they get captured again anyway. 10 out of 10. Bellic then proceeds to open the Ark, which causes everything to just go south real fast. Spirits appear and cause Nazis to die left and right. Not that I'm complaining. And for once, this is one graphic scene that's kind of faithful to the movie. Just less intense, of course. The movie then wraps up. The end. Next up on our list is The Temple of Doom. And oh boy, it's a bit more fucked up and racist than other indie movies. We've got cults, sacrifice, malicious mind control, and even child enslavement. What a package that is. But wait, there's more. As an added bonus, we'll throw in Indy being a jackass, as well as stereotyped characters like Willie Scott, calling out to receive this amazingly bad deal. Thankfully, in the transition from gritty action movie to family-friendly adventure game with grunting characters, Indy's toxic personality was basically cut out. Not all the other stuff, though. Speaking of turning gritty action movies into cutesy family-friendly titles, whose idea was this? I mean, I bet I can tell why this happened, but still. Anyway, back to the movie at hand. Temple of Doom opens up at a club in China. Indy proceeds to make a deal with a gang, and it goes horribly wrong, with Indy being poisoned as a result. After some fumbling about in a chaotic mess, an antidoted Indiana Jones ends up in the streets with performer Willie Scott and Indy's gosh damn child assistant, Short Round. The trio are then chased into an airport, where they escape on a plane. Except they don't. The plane is then sent on a collision course, and they escape with a logic-defying jump out of the plane in a raft, which isn't exclusive to the game. They end up in a village, which is suffering from sacred stones being stolen, and having their children kidnapped and enslaved. After the village pleads for help, the trio set off towards Pankot Palace, supposedly the place where these malicious forces are operating. The trio are welcomed, but not for long. The assault led on them ends up leading to the discovery of some chambers in a secret passage, which they reluctantly go inside of. After escaping a death trap, the trio then witness a secret cult performing a sacrifice. Now, here is an instance where the game plot majorly modifies itself from the plot of the movie. Let's start off with the movie, which sees Indy sneak to the stones once the cult clears out. Indy then investigates some faint wails of anguish coming from nearby passages, as Willie and Short Round get captured in his absence. Indy discovers the source of the wailing and discovers all of the enslaved children. Indy then throws a rock at one of the slave drivers. Indy, you had your heart in the right place, but I've never seen such a horribly short-sighted action be executed in my life. So congratulations on fucking up hard. For your efforts, you've won yourself a one-way ticket to being captured. The leader of the cultists, Mullah Ram, then deals with the captured trio. Indy is forced to drink a nasty substance referred to as black sleep, which puts him under the spell of the cult, effectively making him one of them. Short Round is enslaved in the mines with the other kids, and Willie is set up to become their next sacrifice. Short Round manages to bust his way out of imprisonment, makes his way to Indy, and manages to shock him out of his spell. The two then fight off the cult and free Willie. Mullah Ram escapes, and the trio push further into the mines, where they battle slave drivers and free the kids, with Short Round having a battle against a young prince under the influence of black sleep to save Indy. Rewinding back to when the trio first witnessed the cult, the game has events play out in different sequences. Willie gets kidnapped immediately, and Short Round and Indy battle their way through the mines to rescue her from the sacrifice. Once she's rescued, it's Short Round's turn to get kidnapped, and Indy and Willie head off to rescue him, battling slave drivers and freeing children along the way. Short Round frees the prince's will, Indy finishes battling slave drivers, and then the trio begin their escape from the mines via minecart. One flood caused by Mullah Ram later, the trio emerge on a cliffside on the outside. After being on the run for some time, they are cornered at a bridge. A boss battle occurs on the bridge, and it all ends when you finish cutting it. Mullah Ram falls to his death, and the trio return to the village, which is once again full of life and children. The end. Our next stop is The Last Crusade. The beginning of this movie is handled a little weird in the games, and we'll talk a bit more about this later. For now, just know that an entire section of the first part of the movie is skipped. We instead start out with Indy and his good friend Brody heading off to Venice to meet Elsa to continue a search for the Holy Grail. Indy's father was obsessed with the Grail, and now he's gone missing. Someone by the name of Donovan has presented Indy with a newly discovered clue. The trio take their search to the library, where they cause severe property damage and uncover a crypt beneath them. Indy and Elsa jump in, while Brody takes on the job of staying behind and getting knocked unconscious. Indy and Elsa find just the corpse they need and are soon forced to make an escape thanks to a not-so-convenient fire someone started. Once they escape the crypt, they are chased through the waters of Venice by a group seeking to protect the Grail. But given that Indy is more sought after his father than he is the Grail, he is let go and sent on the path to his father. Indy and Elsa then head to a castle in Austria. Indy soon learns that Nazis have set up base there. After some sneaking around and busting through windows, Indy finds his captured father, then learns both Elsa and Donovan's true colors as Indy is tied up with his father. After Elsa and Donovan leave, Indy and his father create a kinda convenient fire as they try and escape. After some more escape efforts, they make it to the garage and escape via motorbike. After being on the run for a bit, the two then head to Berlin to retrieve the Grail book, which Elsa took earlier. They then head to a Zeppelin port and sneak aboard. The hunt for Indy and his father doesn't stop. The Zeppelin staff catch on and turn around, prompting the two to escape via plane. They are pursued by more planes, which devolves into the two of them crashing and escaping on foot. After scaring some birds into some planes, thus causing violent accidents, Sala picks up the two and the race for the Grail continues. The search leads them to a desert canyon, where the Nazis are also searching, and the two groups proceed to get into quite a battle. Indy barely emerges alive, and the crew, now including Brody again, push on. They finally find themselves at the Grail Temple, with the Nazi crew, including Donovan and Elsa, already inside. They gravely injure Indy's father to motivate him to find the Grail to cure his father. One deadly trek through the temple later, Indy finds the Grail chamber. Donovan comes in shortly after and chooses poorly. Indy chooses correctly and brings it back to his father at the entrance of the temple. The Grail isn't supposed to be taken any further beyond the seal, but Elsa doesn't care. She doesn't want to let it go. The temple collapses, and our party of four escape, and ride off into the sunset. The end. Now, before we move on to cover the next game story, let's talk about some stuff first. First off, what on earth is going on in the Indiana Jones universe? Given that not only the Ark and the Grail exhibit supernatural abilities, but the Shankar Stones too, implies that different kinds of gods coexist. I don't think that... What? Anyway, universe oddities aside, LEGO Indy 1 does a good job of communicating the plot and being coherent, even if you haven't watched the movies. Of course though, the story is mostly there to string the package together. How about that gameplay though? Well, recommendation gets weird here. As said earlier, you punch a lot of things in LEGO games, and oftentimes it isn't much more than that. However, if going through levels, punching everything in sight, and racking up the points that spill out sounds fun to you, you're in for a treat. Difficulty in these games is nothing to write home about either. Combat is fairly basic, and the many puzzles, if they can even be called that, aren't really head-scratchers. And you know what? That's fine. Despite not being hard, the game is still very engaging and involving with its level design, meaning you aren't just going to be holding right to win. Personally, I find it fun. LEGO games aren't going to find their way into any personal top 10s, but they're still very enjoyable times. To further add to the mellow experience, LEGO games have a 2-player partner system, meaning that 99% of the time, there will always be 2 or more playable characters present. You can play the game as just one person, easily swapping between your party members and making use of their abilities. Or a second player can drop in and out at any time and take on the role of a party member. A lot of the puzzles require cooperation between the different characters, making this a very enjoyable couch co-op game with a friend. Or frustrating if at least one of you is that kind of person. Now, depending on what you like out of your game experience, LEGO games might be a bit underwhelming and short if you just finish the game, going from point A to point B and nothing else. They're the kinds of games I highly recommend completing, because then they get meaty. Each level has a score quota and a handful of collectibles to nab, some of which can only be obtained in free play mode. Free play mode is unlocked when you beat the level story mode, and allows you to play through with any characters you've unlocked, which, by the way, there's a lot. This allows you to do things you couldn't before, and access entire areas that you couldn't go to before with the default characters. You could argue this is padding, and you know what, you're probably right, but it's nice to be unbound by the shackles of the story script and go wherever you want and collect some new things. One of the things you'll find in each level is a parcel that must be delivered to a mailbox. Once mailed, you're able to buy a cheat from the hub. You could insert a code and bypass that altogether, but this method has a legitimate feel to it and a sense of getting more powerful. The cheats will do a variety of different things, stuff like invincibility, score magnetism, faster actions, and more. The most game-breaking ones are the ones that multiply your score. They even multiply themselves if you have multiple of them on. If you so much as look at a stud, you become absolutely loaded. You've also got access to little dinky novelty extras like cheap disguises, silhouettes, ice rink physics, etc., but they aren't much. Another type of collectible is mini-kits. There are 10 mini-kit pieces hidden throughout each of the 18 levels. Collect all 10, and you get a complete mini LEGO construction relevant to the level. One last thing LEGO Indy 1 will have you hunt down is Star Wars cameos, and there's a good chunk of them. Gee, I wonder why. Find all the cameos, and you get to play as Space Indy himself, Hand Soap. Rewinding a bit though, completing enough mini-kits will unlock things too. Barnett College, the hub, serves various purposes, one of which is entry points to 3 bonus levels. Access is gained by completing mini-kits. The first of these levels is actually one of the opening segments from the Last Crusade, Young Indy, which is a pretty standard linear level. Nothing major, but a welcome addition. The second level is one I had a lot of fun with when I was younger, Ancient City, an all LEGO level. It's a playground environment, where you mess around and destroy stuff until you vacuumed up 1 million studs. When I was younger, I thought about how cool it would be if there was an entire LEGO game that looked like it was made of Legos. Now, well, I just don't simply give a dang. In fact, I'd argue that the movie faithful environment style helps keep a clear line between what's just the environment and what's interactable. So, the first bonus level was a nice story addition. The second was a fun playground. What could be the third, you ask? A boring pile of shit. It's a big old warehouse filled with vehicles and road stuff. Now, if this is supposed to be a vehicle sandbox to just mess around in, that's neat as a concept. Problem is, you guessed it, it's boring. For starters, there's no music. Only ambience. Yeah, deafening silence sure screams fun, alright. Secondly, there just isn't much to do with the vehicles, nothing exciting. Lastly, it's treated just like the previous level in that you need 1 million studs to beat the level. The only way you're doing that is if you stand in front of this target off to the side and just shoot it for a few agonizingly long, painful, boring minutes. Boy, I'm just on the edge of my seat with this gripping gameplay. And for now, that's LEGO Indiana Jones, The Original Adventures. We'll dab in Indy some more later, but for now, let's take a look at the other LEGO franchise that consumed my childhood, Batman. Batman is interesting in terms of its story department. It's not based off any existing movie. All, or at least most, of Gotham's notable villains have escaped. I'm no expert on Batman lore, so I don't know if anyone's missing from the headcount. The villains end up separating into 3 major groups, ring-led by 3 different villains: the Riddler, the Penguin, and the Joker, which splits the game into 3 unique campaigns. However, the game has both a hero side and a dark side. The villains have their own side of the 3 campaigns, effectively doubling the length of the game. And it's not cheap padding either. The level layouts, and sometimes even the locations, are entirely unique from the hero counterparts. Now, the schemes each villain tries to carry out escalate. For starters, Riddler wants to rob the Gotham Gold Reserve. Pretty tame, honestly. Next in line is Penguin, who wants to... I don't know, honestly. Enslave? Terrorize? Something that involves robotic penguin minions. Lastly, we come to the Joker. Oh, he only wants to kill everyone. No big deal, no big deal. Now, the journeys you take to the conclusions of these arcs isn't going to win any awards. They set up the levels and context and transition you between areas, not much more. But hey, simple game, simple story. It works. Now admittedly, I prefer the dark locale of Gotham over the deserts and jungles of Indiana Jones. For a simple story spanning 30 levels, you are taken to a variety of places around Gotham. Sure, you got regular, boring locations like the streets, the docks, or even the rooftops, but there's still plenty of other places like the Botanic Gardens, an ice cream factory, a zoo, a club, a carnival, the sewers, an art gallery, etc. Now granted, some locations get repeated on both sides of the story, but as stated before, the villains take entirely different routes than Batman and Robin, which keeps things fresh. Gotham's unique, dark and twisted aesthetic makes me want to keep playing them anyway. At the very least, it handles intertwining stories better than Dreamcast-era Sonic. Sprinkled in with the levels are vehicle levels. I've never really been a fan of vehicle levels in games like these, but they're alright here. A change of pace at least. The first chapter gets an on-road level, the second chapter gets levels in the waterways, and the third chapter has vehicle levels that take you to the skies of Gotham. Only one of the 6 segments of the game doesn't get a vehicle level, the Villain Side Riddler chapter. In its place, Riddler and Two-Face invade Wayne Enterprises to snag a powerful weapon, which ends up being useless. But at least I got to control Riddler, who's controlling a scientist, who's controlling a robot. Wait, who's controlling me? Speaking of mind control, let's talk about character abilities for a moment. LEGO Indy had some pretty basic abilities, like Indy's whip, digging, fixing stuff, etc. Nothing to write home about, but all relevant to the theme. LEGO Batman, on the other hand, has a whole slew of interesting abilities on both sides of the story. While the villains get access to abilities based on their quirks and mutations, Batman and Robin get access to suits. And it kind of has to be that way too. With Indy, the story mode has you switching through characters and changing up your party. With Batman's hero story, you play exclusively as Batman and Robin. The suits inject that juicy variety, and I'd argue it works better than before, given that the level design can now easily give and take suits as it pleases. The duo will receive a variety of suits, such as the Demolition suit, the Magnet suit, the Tech suit, and even the Sonic suit. Unfortunately, it's not for breaking the sound barrier, just breaking glass. The minor changes don't stop at the suits and abilities either. The handful of Star Wars cameos got updated to 25 citizens needing rescuing. And instead of taking a parcel to a mailbox for an extra, you just collect a red power brick. Granted, I guess that's how it was before, but it's still a change. And given that there are twice the levels now, there's twice the red bricks. The villain side levels get your typical extras, while the hero side levels get a bunch of suit upgrades and novelties, like fast magnet walking, the sonic sound waves hurting enemies, or even decoys for Robin's technology suit. A family can be Batman, and Robin, 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 and Robin. Another minor change was applied to the combat. You get a temporary skull multiplier when you attack enemies in quick succession, which climbs up to times 10 the more you do it. You can also grab an enemy and pummel them for a bonus 100 studs. I mean, it's not anything groundbreaking, and you can still blast through combat by mashing the attack button, but it's nice that the game incentivizes you to at least be a little aware. Unfortunately though, those combat bonuses are exclusive to a minuscule portion of characters, like Batman and Robin, so you really aren't going to see it on the villain side of things. Interestingly enough though, Joker has a hidden combo of his own. If you proceed to punch someone, then rapidly electrocute people in succession, more and more studs will begin to drop, including rarer blue ones. Unfortunately, LEGO Batman isn't without its kinks. One minor gripe I have is with one certain mini-kit in the 5th villain level of Chapter 2. There's a slide towards the end of the level with 5 gates you have to slide through. It's one way, so if you mess up, you have to finish or exit the level and play all the way up to that point again, just to try again. A more major bump in the game comes in the form of a bonus level. Instead of 3 bonus levels like Indy 1, Batman just has 2, one for each side of the story, and both take on the all-LEGO aesthetic. Now the villain side one is alright. You start off in a gym area, but the main part of the level is a big Pac-Man homage. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it works. The Hero Side bonus level is an entirely different story. You start off outside a mini Lego Wayne Manor, which, while it looks nice, is devoid of much else. It gives me the feeling of being teleported into the void. Like the Ancient City bonus level and the Villain Side bonus level, you must collect 1 million studs. Though here, there is not a single spare stud. One 10,000 point stud sits outside Wayne Manor, and it's achieved through a boring, short task. That isn't the real meat of the level though. It really begins when you're whisked off to a weird Super Mario Bros. Homage. I wouldn't call this the worst thing ever. I mean, it's tolerable, I'll give it that. Part 2 is where it just nosedives further into garbage. I have no idea what the hell this is, but I know what it isn't. Fun. You gotta guide these weird balls so that they collide with these fans. Every single one of them. And the balls are slow and janky with the tendency to explode. These slopes don't help, and the vehicles aren't any better either. You're better off just playing on foot. This level makes me feel like I'm playing a shitty ROM hack instead of an official product, and is by far the worst part about this game. That being said, it's one of the few bad parts about this game, and I overall really enjoy it. A bit more so than LEGO Indiana Jones 1. A bit more memorable too. So that was LEGO Batman. Next up on stage is LEGO Indiana Jones 2, The Adventure Continues. I've got some things to say about this one. Starting off, this game has all 4 Indiana Jones movies, the original trio, and 3 entire segments dedicated to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Given that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is half the game, it has more time to go over its story than the other movies. And it shows. Not only is there one less level per movie than before, but the levels have changed in such a way that they're shorter than before too. But we'll talk about that later. What we end up with is stories that are fast-paced and chaotic. The stories also take more liberties with the source material than before. Here's a Temple of Doom cutscene, for example. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull story gets developed just fine, and isn't over when you blink your eyes. It takes some liberties of its own, but not much more than how the first game handled the original trilogy. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull starts off with Indy and his associate Mac being kidnapped and forced by a woman named Spalko to find an artifact in none other than Warehouse 51. After locating the artifact, Mac turns on Indy, because money, leaving Indy to himself. Or he would be, but the LEGO version of this plot has a random-ass janitor join his side for a bit. The two escape, and end up in a weird fake town full of mannequins, with a bomb about to go off nearby. The two escape being blown to bits by the bomb by hiding in a fridge, and end up being blasted back into town. There is a liberty taken here, of course. Indy just gets blasted into the desert in the movie. The fridge thing still happened. Still only a bit worse than surviving a jump out of a plane in a raft. Indy then meets up with a kid named Mutt in a diner, as per the latter's request. The two end up being interrupted during their chat by a couple of Spalko's agents, but Mutt starts a brawl as a diversion. The two end up escaping and making a getaway on a motorbike. A short while after escaping their pursuers, the two head out of town and begin their journey by train. Since the first segment of the Crystal Skull ends here, The game throws in the boss on top of the train. Not the most amazing boss given the arena size, but not exactly bad either. The two end up in Peru as they search for Indy's old colleague, Harold Oxley. After searching a lead in an asylum, the two head off for some crypts where they uncover a crystal skull. The two then get captured and brought to a small camp, or at least they do in the movie. In the game, they kind of just walk there willingly and then get ambushed. There, Indy meets up with not only Oxley, but his ex, Marion. There's also two details here that are explained in the movie that the game doesn't really do a good job of bringing up. Firstly, Mutt is the spawn of Indy and Marion. Secondly, Oxley kind of got messed up by the skull. Back to the matter at hand, Mutt creates a diversion and the group begins their lengthy escape through the jungle. They don't escape the grasp of their pursuers easily, and they take the chase on the road with cars and jungle cutters. The chase comes to a brief halt when some wreckage leaves both sides of the struggle at the mercy of some killer ants. The movie sees Indy brawl with one of the opposing officers, with a gruesome outcome for the officer. The game amplifies things, to say the least. Or should I say, amplifies. Regardless, I don't remember Ant-Man looking like this. Over-the-top bosses is a reoccurring theme with this game, and every chapter has them. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's also more interesting, and one of the few things I enjoy over LEGO Indy 1. The officer still meets his end with the ants though. This marks the end of Chapter 2. The start of Chapter 3 sees the group get back on their feet. Well, back on their car, and the chase getting resumed shortly after. The group shakes Spalko and her men for a bit, and are within home stretch of their final destination. Though, the game takes a moment to stretch the plot, and Oxley temporarily gets captured by the tribe in the ruins they're traveling through. After recovering Oxley and the skull, the crew heads into the heart of the temple, where they discover where the skull belongs, on the head of an extraterrestrial. You can say that's outlandish, but aliens are nowhere near as wild as different types of gods that can't coexist. Coexisting! They don't have long, however, before Spalko catches up and starts rubbing her grubby hands on things that shouldn't have grubby hands rubbed on. In the movie, she receives the enlightenment she sought, at a price. In the game, she receives immense power and becomes the final boss. A boring final boss. All you do is stand on buttons on top of the rocks floating around her for 2 phases, and then shoot some explosives at shiny rocks. That's it. Gripping. Everyone escapes and E.T. goes home. The end. This movie may have been a bit more outlandish in some ways compared to the other movies, but it works for LEGO. You know what doesn't work, however? The levels. This game got a lot more formulaic than the last games. Each segment of the game can be split into various parts. The hub, 5 story mode levels, 5 bonus levels, and 1 super bonus level. The 5 story mode levels can be split into 4 clean categories. 2 normal levels, a level dedicated to brawling, a vehicle level, and a level dedicated to a final boss. None of these levels are very long, meaning if you play this game just for the story mode, you are going to be getting the short end of the stick more so than the other games. With the exception of the bosses, none of these levels are super exciting either. The brawl levels see you taking out a set number of bad guys and that's it. The vehicle levels, while longer, aren't much better. They're basically brawl levels in large open environments. It's also not fun trying to get the true adventure ranking in either of those levels, especially brawl ones where you're dropping your studs every 5 seconds. The driving levels aren't treated like levels you progress through like you do in Batman either. You just drive around the map hunting down the vehicles you need to take out. You also attack the vehicles in a different manner. In Batman, you always had weaponry like guns or torpedoes at your disposal, while guns only prop up occasionally in Indy 2. Instead, your method of taking enemies out is bumping against them and wearing out their health. Though I will admit, it is fun to do this. The changes to the story mode levels didn't stop there, however. Another change they experienced was in their free play mode, which changed drastically. Now, I'll be honest, I enjoy the concept of what they did here, but it still ends up being dragged down by the length of the levels. Instead of going through the entire level again with any character you've unlocked to get to the things or places you couldn't do before, You bring any two characters from the hub into the level and play through it in a new point in time or circumstance, like the diner after dark, or the mannequin house after the bomb went off. Rarely will a free-play level take place on an entirely new map. In these new free-play levels, your objective changes too. The objective varies wildly from level to level, with no consistency, except for vehicle levels in which you hunt down 10 blue balloons. I kind of miss the old approach, but this approach isn't bad either, and it's not like the old approach can really flourish here either. Now, what's your reward for beating these levels? You'll net 5 of the 10 mini-kits for that segment's hub, meaning 10 mini-kits no longer appear in each level. Now, where do you get the other 5 mini-kits? From the 5 bonus levels hidden around the hub. These levels are a mixed bag. On one hand, they provide the more traditional gameplay I like out of LEGO games. On the other hand, they're not only short, but done in a bare-bones cookie-cutter style. It has none of the attention to detail that has typically gone to levels in the past. Once you collect all 10 of the hub's mini-kits, you are given the opportunity to build a contraption to take you to that segment's super bonus level. All 6 of these levels follow the trend of the Ancient City and 2 LEGO Batman bonus levels. Everything's made of LEGO, and you must collect 1 million studs. They don't have any unique set pieces or gimmicks like the previous 3 levels, and all feature a bit of a cookie-cutter feel. Though, they're definitely a step up from the dumpster fire that was Batman's Hero Side bonus level. Another major change to occur in this game was how unlocking extras was handled. Just like mini-kits, power bricks are no longer found scattered throughout the levels. This time, there are 3 power bricks found throughout the hub: red, blue, and green. Each have 10 designated objects sprinkled throughout the hub that must be destroyed before they drop from the sky and become available for purchase. Green bricks will always be a cheap novelty extra, like the disguises or a snake whip. Blue bricks will always be a gameplay tweak extra, like invincibility or fast build. Lastly, red bricks will always be a multiplier extra. Now, the hubs themselves are interesting, and I actually do kind of enjoy them. All the unlockables are scattered about the hub and require different things to unlock them, resulting in this puzzle box-like scenario. They're also decently sized, big enough to be fun to explore, but not too big and crammed with garbage. Not something I can say for other LEGO games I've played, but that's a topic for another day. That being said, both fast travel and level selects are non-existent, and I think having them would have been an improvement. Now, there's another feature present in all LEGO games: the character creator. The game gives you a wide array of hands, arms, bodies, hips, legs, faces, and headgear to choose from. But not all of them, though. Don't want to be too generous. LEGO Indy 1 supplies you with 2 custom characters, as does LEGO Batman. LEGO Indy 2, however, supplies you with 18. With Indy 1 and Batman, you could take a custom character anywhere, as long as it was in story mode. With Indy 2, however, custom characters can't be accessed in the hub, but they can still be taken to levels via the quick play option in the warehouse menu. There is another place that can be used though. LEGO Indy 2 comes with an entire level creator. It's not some little dinky thing tacked on either. It's fully fleshed out like Super Mario Maker or Portal 2's level creator. There is a lot of stuff to chew on and mess with here. You've got decent terrain control, access to a lot of interactables, obstacles, and bricks, pre-built base plates, and enemies and vehicles. Wait a second, is that Molaram? Why is Molaram a creator? Molaram aside, remember those shitty bonus levels from earlier? They're made entirely out of assets from the creator. I guess having official examples is neat, but it doesn't change how watered down and low effort it is to have that be a large portion of content in the main game. As well as the previous list of things you can place in your level, you also have control over level objectives and mechanism triggers, which is very appreciated. On top of all this, just like the rest of the game, the level creator is co-op. One can only imagine the sort of chaos that can arise from not just 1, but 2 people smashing level assets together. I do have a couple of gripes with the creator though. As a small starter, the way you control the characters in the creator makes moving pieces around sluggish. A bigger gripe I have is that you can never have all the assets at once. The theming of the room you use limits you to different objects you can buy and use. Lastly, it doesn't have online capabilities, which is such an unfortunate missed opportunity. Otherwise though, the creator's pretty solid. Not all of Indy 2's changes were as big as stuff like new hubs, a level creator, and worse stories, however. There were some small mechanical changes too. Indy's whip has been completely revamped. In the first game, you could only use the whip to interact with the environment on designated spots. In Indy 2, you are free to use the whip whenever. The whip still does the basic things it did before, like pull handles in the environment, but now you can also tie people up with it and carry them. It even works in the other player, so here's to hoping you don't have that kind of friend, because I totally am. You may have noticed the whip also has an aiming reticle now. It's not the only one. Guns can also be aimed now, meaning you aren't stuck with the auto-aiming like the last games. Another feature added to Indy 2 is the ability to carry more than one extra item. With Indy 1, if you pick up one object and go to pick up another, you just drop the first one. With Indy 2, you can hoard as many shiny objects as you can get your grubby hands on, and cycle between them at will. The last thing Indy 2 changed up was how the screen works for co-op. With Indy 1 and Batman, when you're playing co-op, there is no split screen. If you try to move away from each other, you just start creating a game of tug-of-war with the screen. Depending on who you play with, this probably isn't an issue. Again, depending on who. Indy 2 takes a drastically different approach. It didn't just add split screen, it added dynamic split screen. My opinions on this are split. On one hand, it's really cool and can better indicate where both of you are. On the other hand, it can get disorienting as hell. So it's a thing. Overall, I'd say LEGO Indiana Jones 2 is a lot like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It tried to do something new and had new tricks, but it ultimately did not have a good execution of those new tricks, much to its detriment. It took 2 steps forward and 2 strides back. That doesn't mean it's 100% a bad game. You can still have a good time with it, it's just that it's weaker than its siblings. All 3 games are still fairly polished and good simple fun. Again, fairly polished. They play fine, mostly, they look fine, and they sound fine. Granted, that last point is probably because the music is just lifted from the respective movies. Now, if they combined LEGO Batman's approach to level designs and their abundance with LEGO Indiana Jones 2's approach to hub design and level creator, I think that would have been an absolutely stellar game. With that being said, I think it's obvious how I rank these games. LEGO Batman gets my highest recommendation, with LEGO Indiana Jones 2 being my least recommended. And in terms of overall recommendation, I give them all a moderately positive recommendation, especially for people looking for a simple game to chew into, and or a fun co-op experience. If you want an excuse to pick them up, they tend to go on sale during the Steam summer and winter sales for dirt cheap. In fact, I got a bunch of other LEGO games in said sales. Who knows? Maybe I'll review them one day if people want. They aren't absolute must-plays, but they're nothing to scoff at either.